time is running out as European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and Prime Minister Boris Johnson speak on the phone in a last-ditch effort to reach an agreement on a future trade relationship. The EU's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, has warned that trade talks will not go beyond Wednesday, just a day ahead of a European leaders' summit in Brussels, where, if there's a deal on the table, they could give it a green light. But the mood in Brussels' negotiating team has been described as gloomy. Obstacles still remain. The same three that have been hung over have been able to reach a deal so far: fishing rights, how to solve future trade disputes, and a level playing field. The UK Internal Market Bill could complicate talks even further. It's now back in the UK Parliament. MPs will vote again on the legislation that will allow the government to break international law by overriding parts of the Brexit withdrawal agreement. We're following all the latest of these Brexit trade talks and as they go down to the wire. But we're going to be speaking to Tadhg Enright in London. Let's first hear from Jack Parrock, who is in Brussels for us. Well, Jack, Ursula von der Leyen and Boris Johnson speaking on the phone. Do we have any idea of what they've been talking about?
Well, they'll be talking about the progress of this deal and the negotiations that have happened over the weekend. They had a phone call on Saturday evening as well, Isabel, where they said that there was still more work to be done and they needed to intensify talks. It's sure that those talks have intensified. The UK Brexit Minister, Michael Gove, has been in Brussels today. We've seen the two negotiating teams heading back into talks. Michel Barnier, the EU's chief Brexit negotiator, has been briefing the ambassadors, briefing members of the European Parliament. But as you say, the sticking points still remain, and it looks like it's going to take a real hard final push if a deal is to materialise by this deadline that Michel Barnier now says is Wednesday.
But Tadhg, there has been a concession from the UK on the internal markets bill. Will that appease the EU? How far has the UK gone?
Listen, I think it is most certainly a positive step. Now, there were plenty of people in Brussels and in Dublin who were absolutely furious whenever the UK made this pretty bold move earlier this year, when negotiations really were beginning their crucial phase. The UK announced that in the event of there being no deal, that this internal markets bill would allow for it to effectively ignore some of those complicated arrangements within the Brexit divorce deal to allow the border in Ireland or on Ireland to remain open, the new UK-EU frontier. The government even at the time acknowledged that it would break international law, what was contained in this internal markets bill. So in announcing that it would or might remove or will remove those controversial clauses in the event of there being a deal agreed very soon, they are doing what many people expected them to do anyway, because in the event of a deal, there is no need for these clauses. But of course, the other way of looking at it, the cynical way of looking at it, is that Boris Johnson's government is simply undoing something which many, even on his own team, said shouldn't have happened in the first place. It drew the ire of all surviving, all living former prime ministers of the UK. So you can look at it cynically, but I think everybody would agree it's a good thing that this announcement has been made and this gesture is likely to happen.
And then tell me, Tadhg, the UK has also sent Michael Gove to speak to the EU Vice President, and that's over worries about checks on goods and entering Northern Ireland. What's Michael Gove hoping to achieve there?
Yeah, well, I was just talking, of course, about those complicated arrangements about Northern Ireland, and what they're seeking to do is iron out what they will actually mean in practice come January the 1st, because Northern Ireland will still officially be part of the UK's customs territory, but in practice will be part of the EU's customs territory. There will be a border going down the Irish Sea, which means that goods moving from Britain into Northern Ireland will be subject to customs checks, and that will come into effect on January the 1st. Now, that poses problems for the UK-wide supply chain and the movement of goods within the UK. For example, the big UK supermarket chains who have branches in Northern Ireland will suddenly have to contend with their goods going through customs checks as they go to another part of the UK. And unlike other aspects of the new arrangements, new customs arrangements, which will be coming into effect in the new year as goods cross from the continent and into Britain and from Britain into the continent, these won't be phased in. They're going to come into effect bluntly on January the 1st. So what they're seeking to do is find a way to cushion that blow and all the impact it'll have on businesses that trade into and out of Northern Ireland. But like so many aspects of these negotiations so far, a solution remains elusive. Isabel?
Solution does remain elusive, and patience is fraying on both sides, isn't it, Jack? Because Michel Barnier has set a deadline for this latest and possible last round of talks, saying it must end on Wednesday.
That's right, Isabel. And the reason that he says Wednesday is essentially because the European Parliament has to ratify this deal. And that is a process that takes a while. It needs to be translated into all the languages of the member states of the European Union. Now, to discuss this a little bit further, I'm joined on the line by Sandro Gozzi, who is a French MEP, sits with La République En Marche, Macron's ruling party, in the Renew group in the European Parliament. Sandro, what do you make of the status? What's your assessment right now? Can there be a deal without compromises from the United Kingdom side?
In Parliament, we have always been ready to work and to assess and approve a good deal. It is clear that a good deal requires some compromises on the key points on which we have been negotiating for months, and they are still outstanding. So, I mean, we are waiting on those issues to be tackled again, and maybe solved at 5 minutes to 12, as we say.
Do you think that Wednesday is the realistic deadline? Do you think it could be pushed further?
I think it would be rather difficult to push forward because, as you have just mentioned, we have a specific technical procedure and technical deadline that must be respected. I mean, we work in 24 languages. So it's something that cannot be done in 12 hours. So, I mean, certainly the clock is ticking and the time is running out.
Talk to me about this. So we're having phone calls now between Boris Johnson and Ursula von der Leyen. There is a sort of top-level contact. But heads of state and government, like French President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, haven't really dipped their toes too far in the water in this, as they did when the withdrawal agreement was being negotiated. There was much more engagement from them. Do you think it might take a Macron-Merkel intervention, and what might that look like?
Well, I mean, it is pretty difficult to say. France also has always been very committed to have a deal, to have a good deal, but not at any cost. And some requirement that some aspect of the deal, which have been requested by France, are not nice to have points, but must to have points. I mean, it is clear that we are talking about a trade relationship between the biggest single market in the world and a partner which is 10 times more important than Canada. UK is, in terms of trade flows and economic relationship, is 10 times more important than Canada. So it is clear that, I mean, we can accept a certain degree of divergence on certain issues such as health, social standard, but we need also to have some instrument to correct if the divergences are excessive. This is a very sensitive point for us, but on which there has been any concrete improvement from the British side. So, I mean, on one side, we understand that the Brits are saying, after all, we are a third country from the 1st of January onwards. Why do you ask us things that you haven't asked to the Canadian, for example? The point is that we are talking about something which is in volume, in intensity, in importance, is by far more important. And on that, and this, I think that it is the real outstanding issue of the negotiation. Then there is also the issue of a fair competition, of state aid, which is very sensitive for both, and for some countries, among these France, to have a satisfactory solution of the fishery issues. I mean, we have been negotiating for months. At the end of the day, yes, 98% of the deal is done, but the 2% is these three issues which are there again, and we have been there in the last months.
Just let me ask you this. You are a French MEP, but you also were an Italian Europe minister a few years ago. You know EU spheres very, very well. But what about people, for instance, in France, for instance, in Italy? What is your sense of the French population and the Italian population and EU citizens in general? How do they feel about this Brexit issue? Are people terrified of no deal? Do they care?
No, people think that Brexit has already happened, by the way. I mean, the public opinion is not aware of this very important aspect of negotiation, but which are reserved to the happy few or unhappy few. I mean, like you and me, that we follow this very closely. But I mean, this is not an issue for the public opinion. It is very sensitive for certain aspects. In France, the issue of fishery is certainly very sensitive and very important in Normandy, in Britain, etc. But the general public opinion, I think that Brexit has happened. And then, I mean, it is clear that we want a deal, but my position is that we are preparing rightly also to a no deal. Because if to rush from here to Wednesday means to wrap up a deal which is not satisfactory, it's better to go for a no deal and then to sit back on the table next year, more relaxed and after the Christmas break. We are ready at the Parliament. We are ready even to be convened between Christmas and New Year's Eve. It's not a problem. It's not. There isn't any Christmas holidays problem. I want to be clear.
Sandro,
I mean,
thank you so much. I really appreciate it. We've run out of time, but I really appreciate your opinions there. But Isabel, as you know, a no deal would mean that the two sides traded on World Trade Organization rules. Tariffs would be slapped onto goods on either side and could be a really, really complicated situation when the end of the transition period happens on midnight on the 31st of December.
Yeah, time is running out. We've said it many times before, but it really does seem to be now. Many thanks, Jack Parrott, for us there in Brussels.